There's often a progression that moves from leader to team to organization. So it's hard to change the culture of an organization, for example, if the senior leadership has not addressed their issues, their shadow side and the dark side of their leadership. So for them to become more integrated and transformational in their work lays the groundwork then for the team and the organization to change and grow with them. The challenge in coaching is to get to the core issue. There's lots of surface issues, lots of secondary and tertiary issues with leaders that they can be concerned with and occupy a lot of their time and energy. But the core issue is harder to identify. And the way I like to talk about this is with a metaphor. Like in California, there's the San Andreas Fault. And every once in a while, that fault line will shift. And it doesn't take a lot of pressure for an earthquake to occur because it will slide or shift along that fault line that's already there. So effective coaching, if you get to the fault line where there is a split or there's some fragmentation or there's been these inner vows or commitments, sometimes it's as plain as I'm living a lie. There's a lie that I'm believing about my life, about how life works, that I'm depending on for my success. If we actually undo that, if we kind of cancel that big lie or address that fault line within that leader's life, soul, then so much more of the symptoms and the secondary effects of their leadership can be addressed. What happens then is the leader comes into the team being somewhat of a different man or a different woman. And it's like new wine is being brought into an old wineskin. And so the team has some adjustments to make in order to work effectively with this leader who's made a significant shift, perhaps in her identity or her set of values in which she leads a business or an organization. So the idea of getting the team aligned with the vision and the strategy of the leader is very important. And what I like to talk about here is some fundamental human architecture. Like, what is the fundamental human architecture of an effective or successful enterprise? And it's usually about breadth and depth. Like, there's a certain diversity needed and a certain capacity or depth needed for a team to be extraordinary in its work. So the diversity part, there's four kinds of leaders that I look for on an effective team: an integrative leader, an operational leader, a collaborative leader, and a visionary leader. And what happens in our culture and in most corporate settings, highly organized settings, is those upper tier, upper quadrant leaders are very dominant. It's kind of the head in the hands type of person. We set our goals and we execute on them. We cast a vision and we perform against it. But the architecture required for a very healthy, powerful system also involves those lower quadrants. Those lower quadrants are the collaborative leader, the person who can build relationships of trust, create circles of trust, develop a powerful, meaningful culture. And those people who have the gift of vision, telling the story, coming up with iconic symbols and brands, those people are also needed. So when you develop a team, if it has breadth and depth, it can be an incredible asset to an organization. Then that third phase is when the culture and the organization as a whole needs to shift and change, because now the leadership community is beginning to change. And the DNA of the culture is becoming embodied and being led by the leadership teams and managers and vice presidents and key leaders throughout the organization. And there's some basic fundamental things that if the culture can capture it, the whole organization can thrive. And that is, how do we lead constructive change? That's one critical core competency. Another is, how do we transform conflict into organizational energy? Now, if that gets saturated in the culture, it's a game changer. Because conflict, tension, differences, issues often derail teams and individuals and the organization as a whole. Another one, key competency, is how do you develop relationships of trust, circles of trust, and environments where people feel safe and empowered. A final core competency is, how do you foster creativity and innovation? Like, are there structures, systems, processes by which creativity and innovation, taking risks, doing pilot projects, experimenting and learning, becoming a learning organization, gets embedded in the culture? So when leader, team, and organization begin to work those things into the culture, it becomes a very powerful, effective human enterprise. The change process we're talking about can go both ways. And sometimes it's interactive. Like, there's enough pain in the organization that a consultation or an intervention is required to address it. But what that exposes or creates awareness for is some team development. And then leaders on that team sometimes need coaching to really contribute to the resolution of the issue that surfaced in the first place. What I like to do is actually work both individually and with a team at the same time. And the reason is that one catalyzes the growth of the other. So that some of the communal learning that takes place in team development really enriches and strengthens the individual coaching work. And then the individual coaching work allows that leader to go back into the team and function even at a more effective and powerful level. So the thing that I keep in mind is to think systemically instead of linearly. Like, one of the things I like to, a principle that I hold to, is you cannot solve systemic problems with linear solutions. So it's kind of a back and forth movement with addressing some problems that are linear, but how does that affect the whole? And how do changes in the whole then allow you to address some particular linear problems? And that back and forth systemic work, I think, is more transformative than most consulting practices.